Okay, let's go. Hi everyone, I'm Nathan Lilly. I'm a Comcast UI engineer, and I'm here to give a talk on accessibility in JavaScript. As soon as... There, oh. What the heck? Okay. It's about fixing your site's accessibility with JavaScript and how not to break it in the first place. What is accessibility? It's making it as easy as possible for everyone to access your content. So whether they're on a phone, whether they're in a club, whether they're blind, whether they're hard of hearing, or they have motor difficulties, everyone should be able to access your content. The way I like to think about the accessibility in general, or at least in terms of screen readers, is what if the user interface were more like an automated telephone system? You wouldn't have any visual guide to how to get through the system, but you would have to tell the user what they could do before they get through it. Who benefits from accessible content? So they're the impaired, which we're familiar with. So people, when you're making a site accessible, you need to account for people who have trouble with contrast, people who have trouble seeing color, poor vision, and people who are blind. You also have to account for people with motor control issues. So people with Parkinson's, people who have arthritis, nerve or muscular damage in general. You also have to account for people who have cognitive issues, so dyslexia, autism, and so on. You also have to account for people who are temporarily impaired, and this is a large group of people who you typically don't think about. So people who are, if you're driving home from work and, the sun is shining on your screen, that makes your screen have a low contrast. Try to account for that. If you're in a very loud environment, you can't give audio cues that you normally could. So, if people won't hear your phone ringing in a club. If you've broken your arm and you can't use a mouse, you need to use the keyboard. If you're in a elevator and you're crowded, you don't want to pull out your phone and bump into everybody. You just hike it up and you type like that. So you've actually lost some of your motor control. Or cognitive. Again, if you're driving, if you're distracted, if you have children running around and you need to get something done really quickly. Also, if you're drunk, if you've been drinking, you're temporarily impaired. Machines. There's, especially nowadays, machines are going to be using our content and needs to be accessible by them more and more. You can break it down into several different classes of machines. So we're all familiar with SEO and site crawlers. Personal assistants, you can actually go on and say, Siri, find me this. Jarvis, do that. But there's also more and more people are interested in the machine learning and the artificial intelligence, where you have your home security systems, self-driving cars, and so forth. Everyone benefits from content when content is accessible. So you should make it accessible. How does accessibility get broken? Semantic HTML all by itself is 99% accessible. So therefore, we should never use JavaScript at all. Thank you. Have a good night. But you want your page to look a certain way and to do stuff. It's fun, but only if you're able. What you need to look for when you're developing using cascading style sheets and JavaScript are these red flags. when you hide elements, when you use dishonest elements, when you hijack the user expectations, or when you turn off expected features. When you're hiding elements, to most people, they default to the display none. When you use the display none, screen readers can't access that. So you need to provide alternate means to get to that. So if you're using jQuery show hide, it inserts the style equal display none into your element. Screen readers don't deal well with that. So you might hide your content, when the page loads, the screen reader won't see it. But then when you show that content, the screen reader doesn't realize that something has changed. With positions and transforms, the opposite is true. So you could position content off the page. That's still available in the document flow to the screen reader. And then the nice thing about DOM changes is that screen readers deal much better with those. And if the document changes, the screen reader can recognize that through the document object model. With dishonest elements, so this is a class of items where screen readers are expecting semantic HTML and you're really not using it semantically. So if you're using an anchor tag and you find that you're typing in JavaScript void to keep it from acting like a regular link, or if you're using the hash mark, that's a hint that you should be using a semantic element. In this case would be a button. So it's a clickable element that doesn't go to another resource. A lot of times a designer will style custom form elements. Be very careful with that, because with the custom form elements, it can be styled so that it's not accessible. So that when someone's using, instead of the native radio button, they use some kind of like strange border or image that replaces the click values. Double check that that's accessible. And then if you're applying ARIA roles, that's a good time to make sure that that's accessible, because especially nowadays, if you're using semantic HTML, all the screen readers should recognize a button, and you shouldn't have to apply the role of button to that button. So if you're using a role, just give it a double check. Hijacking user expectations. This class of items are things such as rewriting the tabbing order, changing the way that key controls work. So if the user is expecting the up button or the up arrow key to go up, if you hijack that to do something else, then they're not going to know what's going on. In terms of animations, pages are changing now on the fly. So that I don't know how many times I've gone to a mobile site and I've gone to hit a button, and just as I'm hitting that button, the page shifts. A new element comes in and everything shifts, and I hit something else. You have to watch for animations and stuff like that, so that the people who are slower, who actually do have motor control issues, don't have those issues. And autoplay, I hope everyone knows now that autoplay is evil. Someone lands on the page, typically they don't expect the video or audio to start playing right off the bat. Turning off expected features. This is just one example. So I've seen many times where the little focus style on that goes around links or form elements, and here it's around the HTML link. If you're focused on that, that's the standard style. I've seen designers remove that out of the CSS so that as you're tabbing through the site, you don't know where your focus is in that site. That's like a huge, huge mistake. If you're going to take that dotted outline off of your focus element, provide some other context so that they know where they are where their focus is. I often like to use the hover styles. I'll set my hover styles to be equal to my focus styles so that as you're focusing through, you know exactly where you are in the page. Testing accessibility in 60 seconds. When you land on a page, make sure everything's has keyboard operability. You want to be able to tab through the page, use your arrow keys in the form elements that require it, make sure enter and space work on the various form elements. Get a screen reader. NVDA is free. Use it with Firefox. It does not play well with Chrome, doesn't play well with IE. You'll wonder why your page isn't accessible if you're trying to use NVDA with a browser other than Firefox. So land on the page with NVDA running, listen to the page, make sure that it reads what you expect it to read, and that it doesn't read what it's not supposed to read. And then there are hotkeys that once you get NVDA and become more familiar with it, double check your hotkeys, which are, you hit the hotkey for your H1 and it'll read off your H1 tag, hit the H2 and it'll read off all your H2s on the page, double check your links. Those are the top level items. You'll catch a lot of your items if you hit these few things. So we've covered what is accessibility, who benefits from accessibility, how does accessibility get broken, how do you test for broken accessibility. Can I use JavaScript to enhance accessibility? Yes, of course. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. 98% of screen reader users actually have JavaScript enabled, so it's safe to use JavaScript to enhance your accessibility. Some guidelines for accessible interactions. Pretty much the opposite of what we just covered. Design for keyboard operability. Use device-independent event handlers. Give users more information. Give users more control. The most widespread assistive device that people would use would be the keyboard. Many assistive technologies hook into the keyboard events. Here's just a highlight of some device-independent event handlers. So regardless of what device you're on, you can also almost be certain of using on focus, on blur, on select, on change, and on click. Avoid device-dependent event handlers when possible, or if you do need to use them, double them up with other event handlers so that they can be used in multiple cases, similar to on hover and on focus together. Giving users more information. You add additional information to the page, and I didn't go into detail on this because it's more of a CSS fix, but you can actually add a visibly hidden class to text so that, for example, if you have a row of links that all say edit, that's not going to tell a blind user when it reads off edit, 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 what's going on. So you would want to add additional information, so it would be like edit, and then a span class with a visibly hidden class. And in that, it would be like edit name, edit place, edit phone, so that visibly you would just see edit. Visual people would still have those cues, but then for the screen reader, you would have the audio cues as well. And then as you're changing the page, you also want to try to provide additional instructions as you need it. And this is kind of a does it feel right kind of thing. When you have a suggestions or an auto suggestions drop down, you might want to throw up a little cue that says, here are your suggestions. There are 12 suggestions. And use the up and down arrow keys to go through those. There are a bunch of accessibility helpers that you could use, I guess little tools, but you need to be familiar with area tagging a bit. So in terms of, well, there's area tagging. There are keyboard key helpers, identifying focusable events, blocking focus, and using announcements. So for the area tagging, there are a wide list of area tags, and you also have roles that you can use, but the most, I'm just going to highlight the area live because that ties in with the speaking or the announcement helper, and I'm not going to go too deep into it, but you have area hidden attribute. Is that on there? I don't see it. Oh, it's a state. Sorry. So what area hidden does is that when you add that attribute to a element, the screen reader will not read that element. So if you, for example, if you position something off the page but you don't want it to be read, you would use the area hidden to completely hide that from a screen reader. So the accessibility helpers rely on, in this case, we're relying on an accessibility object. Now, I'm using the as my variable A11Y. So a group came together, created A11Y as a, help me out, Tim. It's the accessibility as an accessibility project. So there are 11 letters between the A and the Y. And it looks like the word ally. So if you ever see A11Y out in the wild, that's what it's referring to. It's referring to accessibility. So here, I just created an object literal, and then created a new object within that with keys, and this is just a shortcut. It might be used outside of accessibility, but I've used it frequently within accessibility. So when you want to, call the down key, you don't have to remember the code for the down key. So you just type, case A11Y keys.down, and when the event key code uses that value, then it goes on. Identifying focusable elements. This is the list of focusable elements that I use. I don't think there are any other additionals. These are what we use at Comcast, if you ever just check our JavaScript. And what we use this for is to find focusable elements within a widget. And we typically use it to find the first focusable element in a widget because we make that our close button. So when you open a modal window, you want to find your first focusable element, and that's our close button, so that you set the focus to that close element, and for accessibility purposes, people would be able to close that immediately if they want to close the modal. So here's a function for blocking elements. So when a modal opens up, you want people to be able to access what's in the modal, but you don't want them to access things that are outside of the modal. Or if you have some other element where you need to block certain sections of the page. So if you have like an accordion, but you don't want them to be able to focus within the accordion, you would use the blocking focus or remove block focus when you want them to be able to focus within that area. So for announcements, it's another function, a111.speak. What this does is it's utilizing, I don't have where's the laser pointer? So it's utilizing an element on the page that has area live in it. And when you have an element that has area live in it, if there are any changes within that element, it'll read off those changes. So here, we just have the function that when we call it, pass it a value of some text, it'll actually just insert that text in here, and it'll read it. That was all set up for some of this. So, you've been given some requirements. Someone's told you to build a glossary page. And great, we have HTML elements for that. You have a definition list, and you have your terms, and you have your descriptions. So you just code it up, straight HTML, not a problem. It's accessible, it's responsive, the world is good. And then the designers come along, and the business people, and they put requirements around that, and they say, well, we don't really like the fact that you can see the descriptions right away. We want to save room on the page, so let's hide all those elements, and then when you click on it, those items will open. So it essentially turns this into an accordion. So you update your HTML and turn your text in the definitions to little links, and you link it to your IDs for your descriptions, and then you need to go into your style and turn off your description styles and set it so that you have a class to turn those back on. You write your little JavaScript. Here I'm just using jQuery. On click, show the item that show the descriptor that's attached to the item that you clicked on. The problem with this isn't accessible. Even though I'm using a class, I'm using display none in the style sheet, so the screen reader wouldn't know what's happening in there. A slightly better version of this would be to use height and overflow hidden, so that they're still in the descriptions are still in the document flow. A screen reader could read these, but it kind of fails on the requirement where you would click on it and then it would read it. So someone would land on the page, it would
Show free notification, sync NVDA. NVDA exit. Exit NVDA to offer you the exit yes. Press accessible glossary.
So for additional resources, you can go to WebAIM, developer@mozilla.org. They have a web accessibility section about ARIA, and Adina Halter is actually in charge of accessibility at Comcast. She has wonderful resources for accessibility. Check those out. If you plan ahead, you can build accessible items that aren't going to break accessibility and are actually going to be well designed. Thank you.